I am Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight we have a kind of a special presentation. We normally do fly tying, but tonight we're going to have an interview with Al and Gretchen Beatty. They're retired telephone company executives. Today, they enjoy running a family-owned business, BT's Fly Fishing Products. It's located in Boise, Idaho. The two partners manufacture, distribute, operate a video production studio. It's for fly fishing and fly tying. And of course, they write and they tie flies on a commercial basis. And they pass their skills along to next generations via the digital world. They also enjoy their grandkids and keeping a close eye on their three engineer sons' blossoming careers. Both have been recognized for their contribution to Fly Fishers International. Al was the 1994 Man of the Year, 1999 Buzz Busick Award. Gretchen was 2001 Woman of the Year and 2019 Buzz Busick Award. They're the only couple to have received the Buzz Busick Award for fly tying excellence. A love for sharing their skills has opened the whole world to them. Their demonstrations and clinics covering a variety of fly fishing related subjects have been presented in a variety of interesting places over the world, like North America, Europe, Scandinavia, the United Kingdom, and more recently via the digital live streaming world, Facebook, YouTube, etc. Both are regular demonstrators on Fly Fishers International events and for the International Sportsman Exposition Video Theater. They're sought after program speakers for clubs, councils, national and international organizations. And of course, they're valued partners to our Omaha fly tying Thursdays. How did you get started with fly tying, and what was it that initially drew you to the craft?
Go ahead.
I was fishing minnows on a Iowa lake, and I probably was about 10 years old, and this guy stepped up next to me with a fly rod, and he threw the fly out into the water and drug this crappie in. And I mean, I caught a few crappie with minnows and having a good time. But as soon as I saw this fellow casting that fly and pulling that crappie, I was hooked. And it was a few years later that on my 14th birthday, I received a fly tying kit. It was a herder's kit for my birthday. And I started selling flies a month later at the local hardware store. I understand this is Dairy Farm, Iowa, so fly shop. Well, quite frankly, let's see, this is 1957, and it was 1978 before I ever saw my first fly shop, and I was a commercial tire all that time. And how do you do that? Well, you sell them all through the Midwest. You sell them in gas stations and hardware stores and grocery stores and every place where everybody goes, because if there's no fly shops, they got to buy them somewhere. But anyway, and how did you get started, dear heart?
Well, I got started fishing with my dad growing up, and he never let me have a fly rod, but he would give me a willow with a leader and a tippet and probably a renegade for the most part, fishing the small streams above Boise. I have to admit too, we did do a lot of spin fishing, trolling, and that stuff too, and ice fishing. So it was kind of eclectic. I did a lot. But my dad was a fly tyer, and he, as you all probably know, he tied on a rotary machine that he developed from a sewing machine. And so I kind of got hooked on feathers and watching my dad tie. Raising a family, I kind of quit until I met Al, and he got me started again and had to reteach me.
Well, if you've ever seen the rotary machine that her dad tied on, it's an old treadle sewing machine that was turned into a rotary vise, and you didn't have to move your hands. You kept your hands still and you tied with your feet. Let me tell you what, after almost 60 years at the vise, when I sat down at that thing recently and started trying to learn how to tie with my feet, rest assured it was not a pretty picture.
And
That's-
we just tied with scissors and tweezers,
Yeah.
and that was about it. You just cut off a big piece of thread and started tying. And so when I saw all the tools that Al used, I'm like, where do you do all that stuff?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I'll
And now
say
I've
the
got all that
first flies
stuff.
that I tied, you would have thought that I tied them with my feet, but that's a
Yeah.
different story.
Yeah.
I
And
think
unfortunately, our children don't tie. They've all tied, including two of all the grandkids have all tied one fly.
And one fly. Yeah. That was the end of that.
just to see if they liked it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately there's a thing called golf and baseball and a whole lot of other things that they're more interested
Pole
in. And
vaulting.
here they are. They have a couple like us who are reasonably proficient at fly tying and fly fishing, and you couldn't give them the sport. So
Well, I
Well,
think I know that. Oh, go ahead.
two of the boys fly fish occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the one who was a medic in the Army, he could tie flies very easily. He just was really good with his hands, but they just have other things they do.
Right. What are your favorite fly patterns to tie and why?
I'll go first on that. I love tying royal wolves, as everybody knows. When I'm kind of frustrated and want to relax, I tie royal wolves. That's just, to me, a beautiful fly. And I
I would
love
have thought
putting
it would be a royal trude.
Well, I like those too, yeah. And I like parachutes, but royal wolves, I tie a lot of royal wolves, and I love putting on the hackle. That's my thing. I like hackling owl's flies. That's what I like to do the most.
yeah, we often sit side by side. You know, during the years that we were tying commercially for a living, 100% of our living went through the winter was commercial tying, and then we got it in the summer. And there were winters would go by that we probably didn't tie more than a couple of dozen flies all the way through because normally our normal process is, I don't know if you can see this or not. Let's see if it comes up. Yeah. And normally, anyway, normally there'd be a screen in the upper right corner, and that's the two of us working together. And anyway, I'll tie the first half of the fly and hand it over to Gretchen, and she finishes it and puts on the hackle. Usually as an example of order of humpies, I'll do the tail, the hump, and the wing bundle, but not divide the wings, and then she divides the wings and puts on the hackle.
But what's your favorite fly to tie?
To tie is probably a humpy. I mean, I don't really have a favorite. Whatever I can make the most money at is really when you get right down to it. I mean, we look at fly tying a little different than probably everybody on this call. It's three things. What do the materials cost? What does the time to tie it cost? And what's the revenue to the company? You know, and that's no different.
I think you enjoy experimenting as much as anything.
Probably that's very true.
If I haven't seen him for a while, I check down here and he's generally trying something new. That's
Yeah.
Well, Gretchen, you have to admit that he probably likes experimenting with fly tying as much as you like experimenting in the garden.
well, that's probably true.
Very true.
So-
Yeah.
That's
I
true.
would have said that Al's favorite fly is the humpy, but it seems like the two of you, and it's probably led to your success. It seems like you kind of fell into the niche. I think you're probably the best, like humpies and wolves nowadays. I think the hair wing flies like that. I think you've really that's probably been your niche. You do them both so well, and you teach them both so well that I
The
think
shop
that's your.
the shop we tied for in Bozeman liked our hair wings, and so they ordered a lot of
Yeah.
that. We did a lot of parachutes and
Yeah. Usually
humpies.
somewhere around 4,000 or 5,000 dozen a year during that time. But that was two of us tying, not just one of us.
And we had some other flies we tied, but like stoneflies and some nymphs and stuff like that too. But we tied a lot of
Yeah,
herring.
just the hair wing stuff. It gobs of them. But
We went through full skins of elk or deer.
and
Yeah.
elk, yeah. We'd buy we didn't buy little patches like this or like that comes off of a pegboard. We'd buy a full skin. Or there was a couple of fly tackle dealer shows where we found a couple of skins we liked. The one we walked away with 2 elk hides.
Yeah.
And we used them all up. So it's
Wow.
I was dangerous at those shows. I always would say, Al, come here and look at this.
Yeah.
I found an elk. We got to have it. It's perfect. Poor
Well,
Al.
I think this is going to be two different answers, but what are your 2 to 3 favorite materials to tie with?
2 to 3.
Well, for me, it's peacock. I like floss and dubbing, but my favorite, of course, all time is hackle.
Yeah, that would be I would have to say mine is deer, elk, moose, and hackle. That's 4 I know, but that's what it is, and it's
I love peacock.
it was interesting when we first got married. I had to teach her how to wrap peacock because she'd done it with a machine, which with her feet, and she had an awful time.
It was actually
getting it to lay.
ostrich.
Ostrich, yeah.
Ostrich.
Well, ostrich and peacock,
Yeah.
they laid the same. Once you learn one trick, you got them both. And anyway, it was an interesting 2 days with her at the Vice discussing with herself, and I'll leave it at that, of the problems that she was having with that ostrich, which all of a sudden she says, "Oh, I got it," and it's been perfect ever since.
But it did take 2 days. I didn't tie a single fly for 2 days.
Yeah, just wrapped. Went through a whole bunch of ostrich hurl just learning how to wrap that stuff.
Yeah. And it was for an order, so it had to be perfect, you
Yeah.
know. and it's-
So if somebody was getting started in fly tying,
They can't hear me talking.
what's that? What was that? Okay, if somebody was just getting started in fly tying, what advice would you give them?
When you say fly tying, this is not commercial tying. This is just for their own enjoyment.
For their own enjoyment, just fly tying.
Well, buy a book, hopefully our beginning book. Do not buy a fly tying kit. Get good tools, and then take the first fly in our book and buy the materials for it and tie at least 2 dozen of it. And then you'll find that half of those materials will work on the second fly. Get the additional materials that you need. And by the time you get to the end of our book or somebody else that's written a basic book, you're going to have a good understanding of the materials and how to manipulate them.
And if you also, if you learn better by videos, there's similar videos
Yeah, it's so much better. I mean, I learned to tie out of a herder's book, and it was line drawings. It wasn't even photographs. It was just line drawings, and you had to kind of guess at what they were trying to tell you there. And not that they didn't get the point across, they certainly did. But you know, the people today have got YouTube, and it's phenomenal. Uh, it's a phenomenal resource.
The other thing that I would say, a couple of things that when I'm teaching a beginning class, I don't teach a hand whip finish to begin with. And I know that's against what most people do, but I find that doing the whip finish with your hands is very frustrating to a lot of people. So I start out just using a half hitch. Idea being that they can get some success to begin with quickly. And the other thing too is I often have people repeat a function over several times rather than tying a fly and then tie a fly. The idea is that when you're teaching or when somebody's learning to tie, to get that first successful fly so they can fish and have some success.
Yeah, and we both teach that way. We consider ourselves pretty successful teachers for fly tying. And here's a typical scenario. Okay, number one, we know how each other ties, and the process that we go through is almost identical. So I mean, it's no big deal. But I've seen this happen so often in traveling to shows and so forth. Joe and Tom are friends. Hey, let's teach a fly tying course. Okay. Well, Joe does it one way and Tom does it another day. And depending on who's at the front of the room doing the demonstrating, the other one's in the back of the room saying to the guy, "Oh, you don't need to do it that way. I got a better way of doing it." Those are the kind of things that go on all the time. And that tends to confuse people who are trying to learn. And so either have one instructor or two instructors who follow the same practices.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that because I was teaching some fourth and fifth graders today fly fishing, and that exact same thing happened to me while I was standing in the field teaching a kid how to use a fly rod. Kid, like one of the instructors came up to me and said, "No, no, no," to the kid, and he said, "That's wrong. Do it like this." I had to take that instructor aside and talk to him. I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
When I first started tying flies, I was a young captain and I didn't have a whole lot of money to spare, and I couldn't spend a lot of money on materials. As a beginning fly tyer, what would you recommend? What's the most economical way to start into this fly tying business? I guess not as a business, but as just as a tyer.
As a tyer, it get some, not the most expensive, but get some good quality tools, and find a source for chenille, some kind of soft tackle, some kind of marabou. And we all know that your local fly shop should be the local place that you go to. And the truth of the matter is the local fly shop has gone by the way, and there's very few towns that have a local fly shop anymore.
Yeah.
The real world is there's some awful good fly tying materials in craft stores, and you pick the craft store. And
I get chenille, just Red Heart yarn. It works pretty good for a lot of
good
stuff.
And that's at Walmart. It used to be at Walmart for 98 cents a skein, and I looked the other day and it was about $5 a skein. Well, a skein of yarn will last you and your family for probably a couple of generations. It's
And if you, for hackle, get good hackle, but when you start out, don't buy a neck or a saddle. That's more than you need to start out with. Buy one of those 100 packs or something like that are less expensive, but gives you a good start.
That's when I worked at Whiting Farms, I was kind of the driving force behind the 100 pack, and the reason was at that time, a typical saddle that would probably tie 3,000 flies would cost about $150 retail. And and if Tom went out and bought that and had it, he'd have enough feathers to tie flies for his family, his fly club, and everybody else probably for their lifetime. And that's one of the things as a marketing director I looked at and said, well, what can we do to do a value added to the customer, but still not do it at the expense of the company? And I came up with 100 packs, and bottom line, what it is you can get enough flies for 100. At that time, you could get enough feathers to tie 100 flies for about $15. Well, what that did is that was a good thing for the customer, and it took that $150 saddle, and after you did a value added process, it was almost $300 per saddle.
The other thing too is if you are going to buy a saddle, don't buy a gold when you start out.
No.
There's no reason. Buy one of the more inexpensive saddles because you're not, for us, the longer the hackle was, the better because the more flies we could get out of it. But when you're just tying for yourself and learning, that's really not necessary. And actually, you have more. Don't you have more span of sizes in a neck than you do a saddle?
Absolutely.
So the necks now are really good.
Yeah, they are, and that's another thing that whiting offers that we started during my days, and that was we call it the Adams package, and it was half of a grizzly and half of a brown. Well, that gives you a real wide range of hackle and two colors that go into a whole lot of things, including an Adams.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that if you're going to buy materials, buy quality materials, don't go out and buy cheap stuff.
Well, sort of. I think to Gretchen's point, don't go out and buy the highest quality saddle because you're going to spend like hundreds of dollars. You could buy, like Al's saying, the 100 packs, or you can buy a lower grade tape. The key is the best fly tires that we all try to aspire to. They tied with India necks. They tied with these capes and saddles that were very short feathers. And Al has said a few times, there's some times where on a dry fly you might have to use 2 or 3 feathers to get the hackle to, especially out west with heavily hackled flies, you might have to use 4 or 5.
Yep.
My dad bought these big barrels of feathers from a hat factory in New York. That's where he got his feathers. And when we first started to do commercial, I said, well, shoot, Al, we don't have to buy any hackle. Let's use this stuff that I got from my dad, because we had white, we had grizzly, we had brown, big things of it. What, 5 gallon?
Oh, we got at least 5 gallons. That, and 5 gallons of feathers is quite a few feathers.
It took us 2 days.
2 days to decide that it was a losing proposition.
That was just, I mean, it was horrible. Yeah. Number one, it was too big. And number two, the sizes were too big. My dad thought a large fly or a small fly was a 12.
Yeah.
He tied 8s, 10s, and 12s primarily. So, yeah.
Yeah, I always tell my students when they ask that question, I always tell them, buy at the highest quality that you can afford. You don't need the expensive stuff. You can get by very well with the less expensive stuff. Just buy good quality. That's
materials, but not tools. Buy a decent vise that will hold the hook.
I think it's very important where Al started off. Don't buy a kit. I bought a kit from Cabela's, I think, when I first. My grandpa tied flies, and he tied them with the hair from fur that he harvested, the hair from his dogs and stuff like that. And so when I wanted to try to start tying flies, I bought a kit. And I still have feathers to this day. I still have some materials from that kit to this day. And that was right now, I think it's been 40 years. So the point of that is it's better, like Al said, to buy a good book that teaches, the basic patterns, go to a fly tying class, and just kind of learn the basic flies and what you're really trying to do. And then buy the materials that do the flies that come up, in that book, or wherever you are in the world, to match hatches and stuff like that. So
Sadly, a lot of those tying kits that have the vices have very poor quality vices.
Yeah.
And I think that could be one of the most frustrating things, is to have a vice, poor quality vice. There's some decent vices out there at reasonable prices.
This
The
is-
one that I've been,
This is
the
Bill.
one that I've been traveling
first
with
bite-
lately is a Moonlit, and from
Oh.
Moonlit, it's a really good vice, and it's under $100, or it was. I might be a little over 100 now.
Yeah,
A
those
little
are
over
good
100.
vices.
I've got two of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention vices, Gretchen, because in oh my goodness, I'm going back a long way now. 77 or 78, when I first started tying, I was fortunate enough to be have a mentor, and taught me how to use a lathe, and I made my own vise.
Oh my gosh.
And I used that vise for probably 5 years and tied probably 300 or 400 flies on it. And it was a great vise,
Wow.
but I've lost it since then. I don't know where it is now, but
Oh,
yeah.
no.
I
a
still have
quality
my
vise and everything. Yeah, I agree with you. Quality tools, scissors. We don't think of that too much, but good scissors make
Mhm.
all the difference in the world. And the white scissors that you and Al introduced me to are great scissors at a low price.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
This is Bill. I mean, when I started in '69, I mean, John's seen it. I still have my original vise. We think it's a null vise. In some ways, I almost like it better than the modern vices, where my hand sits and for access. And I started off with very little bucktail, some thread from a store, right? A little bit of stuff from Door Sporting Goods in Cherokee, Iowa, because Al and I just grew up 20 miles apart from each other, basically, different ages. We fished the same waters. And I too tied commercially when I was young, and it was just bucktail, marabou, and chenille. That's all I had. And snelled hooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I snelled a lot of hooks for my dad.
Yep, that's for sure. In fact, we have one class that we do on snelled hooks. I think this is the slide right there that we talk about snelling hooks and what you have to do to make it happen. But anyway,
I have a question. So for like a beginner, because basically I have the Cabela set and that's what I work with. Do you recommend like a list of, beginner quality tools to buy from a company? Because when I go and look at stuff and I go, okay, what is a fly tying vise? 50 fly tying vices come up, and you don't have the little shop that you can go to and walk in anymore and look at stuff.
boy, that is so true. Yeah.
And so when I buy something or I try to order something online and I get it, and I may pay $10 at one place for something that I don't know about, and then it's just as good or cheaper or quality than one I could have bought somewhere else. So it's kind of hard without folks with year-long experience. I mean, John Wright's probably the only person I know older than everybody else.
He's the kid around here. What are you
I'm
talking
not
about?
sure how
Oh,
you would think
I just
that.
seen if he was awake back there.
Oh,
I got a question, if you don't mind. With buying the hackles and stuff, is there one pattern that you would recommend for most flies, like the grizzly, or what would you recommend?
Brownhurst. don't
Yeah,
they?
you know what? I have people constantly asking me as I'm doing a demonstration, what color of hackle was that? I said, I don't know, whatever was laying in my in front of in front of me. Because the truth of the matter is, the hackle on most dry flies is supposed to either provide flotation, hold the fly up, and or simulate or stimulate or make the fish think that the insect is buzzing and starting to take off. At least that's the idea. And you know, the truth of the matter is, I've done a lot of doggone fishing all over the world. And if I only could have two colors of hackle, it'd be grizzly and brown. If I only could have one, it'd be brown.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's
Okay,
mostly what we tied with when we were trying commercially was grizzly and brown.
Yeah.
okay.
Rarely.
The other one was, John, you said 70, is that 1770 something that you were using that vise?
Nice try. Nice try.
Here's a,
Jesse asked a question. Over there.
Huh? What's
Mike, you're cutting out or something's happening there.
We lost Mike?
yeah, he cut out and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, something's cutting out with his audio. I can still see his video. Anyway, we never did get an answer to the gentleman that was asking about how do you identify a decent vise or decent tools. And you have something available to you today that all you have to do is filter through the people that are selling something, and it's called YouTube. All you got to do is pick out and watch the YouTube channels that people that you feel are at least demonstrating what you want to know about. And it doesn't take any length of time to figure out what kind of ice they're using. And one of the things that you probably don't want to do is you don't want to buy a $35 vise that was made in Pakistan or India or someplace like that. And in fact, I'm going to show you my first vise after the one from Pakistan broke. I'll be right back.
the only thing a vise has to do is hold the hook.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it's all for convenience, show, look, whatever. We've got a couple of Renzettis around here that we don't use because we actually prefer other vices. We have a Renzetti Traveler, and I prefer my little what I can't remember the name of it now, Moonglow or whatever it is. That is a good little inexpensive vise, and it holds the vise. The other thing is Griffin vices.
Yep.
You can't go wrong with a Griffin vise. I tied on a Patriot for a lot of years, and they're wonderful.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Gretchen, I've got a Griffin vise and I love it. I used to talk about Moonlight. I bought their Moonlight vise 3 years ago when they first came out, and
Yeah,
I love it. I got two of them now. And I'll
Both
tell you another
very
one I
good.
really like is the Peak vise, but I got rid of that original Jaws and I replaced it with a Midge jaw. And that Midge jaw on a Peak vise is absolutely perfect. So, yeah. And the other one I like is the Dan vise. And I know, Al, you sell pieces to the Dan vise extenders. And a Dan vise with your extender is, I've got one with me this week and I'm tying flies here remotely in my hotel. So a Dan
That's what
vise
I've-
is a great vise.
That's what I've got over here on my tying bench. That's what I tie with every day.
Yeah, that's a great vise.
I would like
And it's
to
light.
I would like to say that the RS2 is probably one of the most popular flies in Colorado, and it's Rim Chung's fly, and he ties with a hemostat holding the hook.
Ah,
I've seen several videos of him where it's a hemostat holding the hook. And so really all you need to do for a vise is to hold the hook. You could use vice grips, you could use whatever. And
There you go,
Al
Al.
has some different
Hey, I got one of them.
versions.
When I say that the one from Pakistan broke, this is a replacement. I bought it strictly as because it was identical to the one that was in my first fly tying kit, and it lasted about a month. Now this is a replacement also because the original one went by the wayside, but my dad built me one after that one broke, and you should recognize this.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
And I can tell you right now, I tied flies on not this one because it's a replacement for the one I lost, but I tied flies for probably 10 years. Understand that all I was tying at the time, and in fact, for the first 10 years of my commercial tying, it was all bucktail streamers. Well, what do you need? Something that holds a hook.
That's it. I tied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tie flies commercially on a Thompson A vise. And I
Very
still
vise.
use it once in a while. It's a good vise.
I
what
don't like
about
a
hand
Thompson
tools?
A.
Like I've broken a lot of the hand tools.
I don't like a Thompson A. I never could figure out how to use one. I don't know why.
Ah, they're great.
And I got one, and I liked it, but there was better ones that came along. However, it was made in America, the original ones were. And quite frankly, there was another one called the Thompson B that's
Yep.
a little bit older, and that was a heck of a vise. And we got one of those here if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about and wants to see it.
Now
Yeah,
I
I
tied
got one of them too.
I
Yeah.
tied with a Regal for a while, but and the Regal holds a hook. But the problem with the Regal for me was releasing that.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just,
It-
I would wore my
Yeah.
hands out.
I've
Yeah,
got one of them sitting
absolutely.
right there, and I hate that thing.
Yeah, and that, the interesting thing is Healing Waters bought them as their fly tying vices for veterans. And we had more occasions where the veterans had trouble opening the vice jaws
That's
because that thing is really hard to open. Yeah.
It is. The one thing I really loved it for was when I was weaving, because I could turn it at the angle I liked and made the weaving really fast and easy. But that was the only thing I really liked it for.
That's a good idea.
Do that with any rotary vise.
That's the only vise I have right now is a Regal, but it works.
It works, but boy, I can't tie with it. It kills my hands. My hands are weak anyway.
Well, as
I have
far
a
as holding the
question
hook,
about
you can't
hooks.
ask for better.
I have a question about hooks. When it comes to tying specific flies and they specify a certain size hook and you don't have that, does it really matter if you go at least one size bigger or one size smaller?
Not one iota. And in fact, as I've gotten older, you old guys out there that are close to my age, and
There's nobody out there close to your age.
okay, you guys that are 10 years younger out there,
Yeah.
Here's me.
kids like Mike
Excuse me, wait a
Kelly.
minute.
Anyway,
Wait a minute. I'm
hey,
here. I'm
listen
here.
up.
I'm here.
The hook that you want to use should have a point on it and a way of tying a leader to it.
Well,
Did
yeah,
I mention any brand?
because
or
a lot of
size?
times I can't see the eye.
Okay, well, I'm getting to that because now one of the more successful flies that I fished in a Spring Creek kind of a environment that we have here close to Boise is I just tied 3 really small flies on a big hook. Put them in a row. I mean, and these flies were just they were kind of like the RS2 fly, and you can you take a size 14 hook and you can put 3 size 20 RS2s on it. The fish don't know any different. It's just 3
Great
flies in a
idea.
row there.
In fact, when we were fishing in on the Yellowstone, they have what they call the
Mother's Day.
Caddis hat. Hard for me to say. And we were fishing at one time, and there were so many caddis that a single caddis was not a good option.
The caddis that were bunched up in a mating kind of environment is what the fish went after. I mean, one of the best flies you could fish in that particular environment was about a size 10 or an 8
Just a clump.
Griffin's net, or just a whole lot of hackle wrapped on a hook like that. Worked like a champ. But the individual elk-hair caddis didn't get a lot of attention.
That I've never seen a hatch like that before or since. That day we hit it right.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You couldn't tell what color the oars were on your boat because there were so many bugs on it. That's how heavy that hatch was.
And what we did is we took turns rowing the boat. And if you caught a fish, then you had to row.
I'll tell you, and I'm rowing the boat. It seems like I'm doing an awful lot of rowing, and she's doing a lot of, well, she's hooking up. And I wasn't paying any attention. You know, I'm rowing and going down the river and watching this and watching that and looking at the water. And all of a sudden I start paying attention to my wife about the third day out, and I'm doing a lot of rowing and not much fishing. And she glances at me when she hooks a fish, and when I look away, she throws a roll cast at it. Well, she was hooking about half of those dang things. I caught on to that one real quick.
That was so.
Yeah.
It was more fun fooling him than catching the fish.
Oh yeah.
Poor Al.
Oh yeah. I've been mistreated by her something terrible. I tell you. No, not at all. Yeah.
If you walk up to a new river, you've never fished there before, how would you decide where the fish are holding and what flies to use? It's ought to be half an hour.
Interesting. I've had that happen. But if you just walk up to a new river, if you've done any fishing, you should be able to read the water. When I say read the water, you can identify why the current lines, what creates the current line. A ripple here is caused by a rock over here. And neither one of them may be evident, but what that does underneath the water is pretty amazing. And if you have that skill, you're not going to have a problem. You'll know where the fish are, and it's just whatever you. I guarantee you, I had a buddy. The name is Bob Lane. He would fish 3 loose turns of dubbing on a hook. Period. And usually it was hare's ear dubbing, but sometimes it was something else. And he would just kind of put some dubbing on a hook and go fishing, and he was deadly.
Because he could read the water?
Because he could read the water, and he put something in front of the fish that sort of looked like a bug. The
experience I had, and it was so frustrating for me. I was used to fishing these little streams in Idaho up high where you could see the fish, you could see the underwater structure. It was clear water. They were small. Lots of times you had to wade in the stream because there was so much brush on the side. That's the kind of fishing I was used to. So this guy takes me to the Yellowstone, and he runs off with somebody else. We had a kid with us, so he's teaching this kid how to fish. And I'm looking at this Yellowstone, and it's huge, and I can't see any structure. I had no idea how to fish, so I know exactly what you're saying. I was so cranky that night. I said, the next time we go on that river, you're going to have to show me how to fish it.
But the kid caught a 21-inch brown. Because
he helped him and left his new wife to her own devices. Oh boy, he was in trouble. But I finally learned how to find the scum line, how to find the current on the Yellowstone, made all the difference. And I love fishing that river now. But the first time I fished it, it was a mystery.
Another thing is knowing your water. And a classic example is the Madison River. Now, the Madison has the fish. Okay, in the spring, the water's running a little bit high. After it starts to clear off a bit, but still running high, the fish are hanging along the bank in the gentler water. I don't know what it is that all of a sudden it's like snapping your fingers, and you pull up and dump your drift boat into the Madison River one day in early summer, and there isn't a fish on the bank to be found. Then you start looking across the river, and every place you can see this kind of a riffly water, but every now and then you'll see a dark spot in that riffle, but it's still just a riffle. A dark spot here, a dark spot there, over here. And what that is a little bit deeper water. That's where the fish have moved to.
You're talking the lower Madison,
I'm talking the Madison, even in the park.
really? Oh,
But
okay.
it's mostly the lower
Mostly
Madison
lower.
below Quake Lake, going all the way to Three Forks, Montana. Basically, yeah.
Hey, Al, in Boise, where you're from, down the river going down through Boise.
Okay.
I fished that river in January of about 10 years ago, maybe. And I couldn't catch anything.
You said January?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I couldn't either in
I caught
January.
pneumonia, okay? That was basically it, so.
It tends to fish a little bit better when it's mostly trout, and you need to know your trout and what water temperatures they feed at, and check your water temperatures. And in some days, you're just better off to stay home and watch television. Just no matter how you want to cut it.
The upper part where there's white fish, some white fish are good catching
Yep.
in the winter.
Yep.
Like on the South Fork, we fished that in like February.
Yep.
When it's snowy and cold and nasty. But on a day where the sun comes out, you can catch some really nice whitefish.
Mhm.
And there's some big whitefish in that river. And they're really the native fish in the Boise River, is the whitefish.
Alan, Gretchen, let me dovetail on that and ask, of all the places in the world that you guys have fished, if you had one place you had to choose, where would it be? I know that's a tough question, but hey.
Madison.
Yellowstone.
Oh boy, I'll tell you what, it's a toss up between, okay, I'm going to break this down into number one, we're going to call it small stream. And we're talking, when I say small stream, this is what, it's 10-foot wide, 14-foot, 12-foot. Okay, 24-foot wide stream and smaller. That would be the Lochsaw River in central Idaho. And when we're talking about larger rivers, it would be the Yellowstone from downstream from Yellowstone Park all the way to Three Forks, Montana.
But you can't, the Madison.
I
We
mean,
have one place on
it-
the Madison.
We got a place in the Madison we call Kathmandu, and we won't tell anybody where it is. But our good buddy Bob Jacklin caught a 9-pound, 34-inch brown trout here a while back, and so it has some pretty good fish in. But I'm not going to tell you where it is. It's just somewhere in Montana.
Also, the St. Joe in Idaho is a good fishery
pretty
too
good.
for cutthroat. The other thing too is to divide it by fish. Cutthroat, we go to the Lochsaw or to the St. Joe.
Yeah.
For brown trout, probably the Madison, and for trout, more the Yellowstone, don't you think?
I think so. Yeah. Yep.
So it kind of matters about that too.
And quite frankly, I'd rather row a boat on the Yellowstone than the Madison, especially as the Madison levels out towards summer. It's just a big line, wide riffle, and you can hardly get your boat oars into the water. You only get it in about halfway, and you're just constantly bouncing over rocks. Where if you're reading the water right on the Yellowstone, you can get your oars, a good dip in your oars, and control your boat a lot better.
Plus the Madison, lower Madison has too many floaters on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you don't want to fish that until September.
Yeah.
So yeah, but Yellowstone and Lochsaw, I would say, are probably our two favorite places to go.
Yep.
And we fished a lot of different, we fished the White, we fished a lot of different places.
Yeah, I mean, everybody would think you'd say the Henry's Fork, and we do very well in the Henry's Fork, but it's you have to like crowds if you're going to go to the Henry's Fork.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about the
In
Henry's
fact,
Fork.
if you want a tip and you want to learn to fish something like the Henry's Fork, we're going to go back to that Madison River. There's a section of the Madison River, about 15 miles of it, where it comes out of the Bear Trap Canyon, and you need to look this up. It'll be downstream from Ennis, or upstream from Bozeman, but you look for the Bear Trap Canyon, and when it drops down, it becomes a medium-sized spring creek for about 15 miles. The most fabulous spring creek fishing you'll ever see, and it's lots of crayfish live in that water. And can you imagine, instead of fishing small dry flies in a spring creek, fishing crayfish, and you're catching fish accordingly?
In fact, I'm gonna tie a fly tomorrow.
Yes.
That is one of the crayfish patterns that.
Yeah, in fact, it's in that book, Easy Trout Flies. And anyway, Gretchen's going to tie that. Tell you the story about that. It's called the Easy Crayfish. She developed that, and she used to slip flies in my lunch when I was guiding customers. And
Try this out.
try this out. And I didn't pay any attention. And this one day, I opened my lunch, and there's these couple of crayfish-looking flies in there, and I put one on the customer in the front of the boat, a young kid from Pennsylvania. We didn't float, I don't know, 10 feet, and he was into just a honking big brown, and he was hooping and hollering and having a great time. And it was also right along a pretty high bank. And anyway, this college girl, redheaded, without a stitch of clothes on, had been sunning, and we didn't see that. And she stood up and said, "What's going on?" This kid damn near fell out of the boat. I had to reach up, grab his belt to keep him from falling out of the boat. And all of us were, well.
And you didn't look at all.
I never noticed, but I only noticed that she had red hair. It was absolutely stunning. And I ended up running the boat into a rock. Dang, all of us ended up in the water. And anyway, this gal is just standing up there, still naked as a jaybird, laughing like crazy. And that father and son came back to fish with me from Pennsylvania probably 5 years in a row. And we'd always go there, and we never had another natural occurrence like that. I hate to tell you that, but we didn't. But anyway, that's a guide story just for the heck of it.
Have you guys ever fished Missouri waters at all?
Oh,
The Missouri River or the Missouri State?
Missouri water, Missouri State streams.
I have not.
we fished the Missouri River though.
Oh,
Yeah, the Missouri River below Holter Dam is pretty amazing, but we're mostly Montana, Idaho, Wyoming folks.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we haven't fished other places, but we just don't.
We went to the what was that river we fished in Oregon with John Craft?
That would be
The Metolius.
Yeah, Metolius River.
The Metolius is a gorgeous river, but it is, you've got to know the river. And we did not have a really great time on the Metolius, but it is a beautiful river.
Have you fished Yakima?
Yakima.
Have we fished the Yakima River? We have
Yeah.
not. I've seen pictures of the Yakima, and it reminds me a lot of a smaller version of the Yellowstone.
Oh,
Isn't that a fairly good, oh gosh, not salmon, but
Steelhead.
Steel River.
I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we haven't done a lot of steel. In fact, the only real steelhead I have caught has been back trolling with a spin rod and a lure. I have to admit that. I haven't really fly fished except once on the Wenatchee with a fly for steelhead.
Yeah, it's at least in Idaho. I can't tell you about other places, and then maybe other people have better luck than I did. But when I have to measure hours per fish rather than fish per hour, I kind of look for something else to do. And I don't care if the fish is 12 pounds or 15 pounds. If I have to go several weekends in a row to hook up with one, it is my particular cup of tea. But that doesn't mean that other people don't just love the heck out of it.
But back drifting with a spin rod and a lure, you can catch a lot.
You can also drink a few beers while you're doing that. You know, I mean, Jesus.
No, coffee with a little.
Oh, gotcha.
I caught an awful lot of 45-pound salmon trolling in a boat with a downrigger, and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
No,
Yeah.
it's a lot of.
I've learned another thing, and the big fish deal that I really like catching 16 to 20-inch trout. And I went on a fishing trip to the Florida Keys with a friend. He said, "You need to come down and try these tarpon." And let me tell you what, I don't like catching fish as big as me. It's just too damn much work.
The sharks. He doesn't like the sharks.
Oh, the sharks that sharks will give you nightmares. Jesus Christ. You hook one of those tarpon, and all you pull in is the head because the sharks will eat him up before you can ever get him into the boat.
Completely different subject, guys, just for the heck of it. This is the 60th anniversary of the VE Day. Victory in Europe, World War II.
It is that.
Yep.
That was what year?
1945.
Yep.
Oh, when you
What branch of
guys
service?
decide to write a book, how do you decide on a topic so it won't really just kind of blend in with all the fly fishing books or whatever? Just another book.
I kind of from when we're at shows, when we were doing a lot of shows, and we'd be tying something, and people would say, "Well, I've never seen that," or "That's interesting," and that would kind of add up, and eventually we'd be brainstorming and say, I think we ought to put that in a book.
I can't tell you how many times, when we travel in the show circuit, sounds like a glamorous thing. And the people that you meet at the shows, when I'm saying shows, I'm talking about the professional fly fishing or fishing show, outdoor sports shows and so forth. And the people that you meet are, great folks. And I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, about how many times we talk about books.
Oh,
how we decide with books.
Yeah, books. Yeah, it's great going to these shows and meeting the people. And let's say the show is 3 days long. Sometimes you spend 5 days driving to the next one. And you're sitting side by side down the highway to the next show. You can brainstorm an awful lot of stuff. You should see the notebooks of one or the other. So you can tell who is driving by the handwriting, because we'll brainstorm and outline a book. And then when we get home and the show circuit's done and we got some time in the spring or whenever, the book is basically written, because as much as we've written together, once we have a good solid outline, it's just a matter of filling in the blanks.
Our only sad about books is one time we brainstormed a fiction book and didn't write our brainstorming down. And we had, it was so good, and it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. It's like a second ago, you noticed that I forgot what I was saying. Let me tell you what, that don't get better as you get older. So you kids out there will learn this. And Mike is shaking his head, and he's just a kid yet. I mean,
the encyclopedia that we wrote for the Federation, that was not our idea. That was an idea that was proposed to us, and would we do it?
Yeah.
But all the other books are things, except the La Fontaine, that legacy book, really, Gary
asked us to write
that book.
Yeah.
Somebody
Senior
asked
moment,
about
Dale.
your
Senior moment.
books.
Oh,
Go
we
ahead.
got too many people. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
I'm sorry, it took me a minute to unmute there. I just wanted another senior moment. Like I said,
Well-
it's just senior moments. That's what happens to us when you get over 75. Things just, I tell you what, it's really upsetting to me. I'll pick up my computer because I want to go check something on Google. And by the time I got my computer up in my lap, I've forgotten what it was I wanted to go check.
Hey, it happens at
You understand?
67.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It happens younger, John.
I
But
was
no.
told that when you you go into a room and you forgot what you went in there for, that's because of old age. And you really don't have to worry until you don't know what the room is. Then you need to worry. So I think we're all doing pretty good.
Hey, Al, what kind of boat did
Somebody
you-
was asking, do you have a book out? And so I was recommending some of your books. But the FFI encyclopedia. I think that's probably, if you're getting into fly tying, it's probably the best book to try to get. It's out of publication or whatever, but you might be able to find it. I haven't been able to find it, but
It's not an instructional book, it's strictly a pattern book.
Yeah, and when we contracted to do that book, the publisher came to us and said, "Well, we want you to do this book. We want it to be at least 1,600 patterns long, and at least X number." I think it was like 70% of them had to be patterns never before seen, and that was the walking instructions that we had from him, and he upped it to 1,800. He upped the number of patterns about halfway through the book that he wanted us to do. He upped it to 1,600 from 1,500. That's what it was, because a competitor was coming out with a book and he wanted to beat him in the number of patterns. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff happens all the time, no matter what your business. It don't have to be just publishing. It can be something else.
But to recommend a book, you have to know what a
Yeah.
person is looking for.
If-
For example, the La Fontaine book is really for a certain group of people who want to learn how to tie those Gary books and read
Yeah.
the stories about him.
If you just want to learn how to tie flies, I'll grab
It's
it.
not for a beginning tire. This
Tom
book,
Rosenbauer's book is pretty good.
this
Yeah,
book,
these
what I like about this book is this is a good book for people who want to tie some hair wing and some more difficult flies. And this has some easy way to do some of those. For example, we've used a lot of poly instead of hair and stuff like that. So this is a pretty good book for somebody who can tie but wants to make that a next step.
And the beginning fly tying book it teaches 7 foundation flies. And if you'll recall that we talked about learning to tie flies, that you didn't want to buy a kit, what you want to do is you start out, and if you go to the first fly in this book and buy the materials that we suggest here, and then you get to the fly itself, and it's going to step you through the easiest fly, the next fly with a little bit more difficulty and some of the same materials. And you, at the end of this book, you'll have the skills that you need, and the materials that you'll need to fit just about every trout fishing situation. It won't cover saltwater, and it's going to be a little bit weak in the warm water. But if it's you're after trout, this will do it. And there's other basic fly tying books out there that accomplish the same thing.
But this book too, we were talking earlier about tools and materials. This book also has sections on materials and on tools.
Yeah, that's recommendations that we have for vices and scissors as an example. That's 2 pages in the book of what we recommend. And I'm not trying to sell you this book. I'm just telling you, get a good basic book, and almost all of them will have some kind of a recommendation on materials. As you'll notice in the one that I did just now for the vices, I've got
And of course,
3.
There's some new vices. This book is fairly old. There's some new vices on the market.
I've got 5 different vices there. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I've just got 5 different vices, and all of them are made in America vices. So,
Where did
book
we get that book?
Amazon.
Okay.
Or Jesse, you can get it from Al, and if you do, he'll actually sign the book, that's why I like it, because I love Al's signature and Gretchen on it, because they'll sign the book. And I like hard written things. I like feeling paper for me. It's better for me. And there's the address to email Al up there where he pointed upwards. But I love his books. The colors are great. They're well written, and they for me have been very, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
This is the book that got me started. Jack Dennis and I became very good friends because of him getting me started.
Hang on a second. There we go. Yes,
Back then, this is Western Trout Fly Fishing Manual, and then he's got
I've
two other
seen it.
books to go along with it.
Yep.
And if you were to take a look at this book, you'd swear it's been through 3 world wars and 2 other campaigns because it's been used a lot.
Yep.
I write
the book
books,
that I
but
used
books
when I
aren't.
started, the book I used when I started was written by Paul Fling with artwork by Don Puterbaugh. It was a basic introduction to fly tying.
I've
It was
got that.
published back in 1977. I don't even think it's in print anymore, but if you can find one, it's also a very good book on introductions to fly fishing. So
Yeah, I have that one.
I
It
started
is a
with
good book.
nothing, 0. I mean, it was just whatever, I mean, it's just Hawkeye Outdoorsman, 7th grade, 6th grade, and Wilson Junior High, Cherokee, Iowa. I was like, oh, I like this. This looks pretty interesting, tying a fly. And, like I said, going to Door Sporting Goods and trying to find a piece of fur, scrap this, that, and the other, trap muskrat, whatever. I mean, that was just me. And it was just kind of, I just threw stuff on a hook.
Okay.
But it worked. But
So I know Al's off camera, but you obviously have a passion for fly tying and fly fishing. What do you think keeps that that passion alive?
Well,
I think
gee.
for you, it's your dad.
Well, and Al has really had a huge influence on me. But I think my dad got me started fishing,
Right.
not so much tying. He wasn't really that interested in teaching me how to tie. However, when I got a little older, in fact, after I was an adult, he did teach me how to tie and provided me with one of those rotary vices that he makes. But so it was fishing with my dad. In fact, it was fishing and hunting. I used to hunt with my dad too. I bird hunted and I hunted for big game too. I was kind of a tomboy, I guess you
Right.
might say, and gardened with my dad. So yeah. But as far as fly tying, I think Al and I kind of feed off of each other at this point. And he really has been my instructor. And he's so I mean, he just wouldn't let me just sit and tie. It was like he had me demonstrating what a month after I started tying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He talked me into tying at this show. And then he ended up not tying. And I ended up sitting next to Newberry tying at a sportsman show with somebody with a calling an elk right behind me. It was amazing.
That was back in the days before they were fly fishing shows. They were outdoor shows.
Oh,
And you always hoped that you weren't next to the booth that had the elk bugle they were selling.
and then he talked me into doing a commercial order.
Yep.
Shall I tell him what you did to my flies?
Oh, you might as well. You've teased it enough to go ahead.
So I was tying an order of carry specials. And at the time, I was on a temporary assignment for the phone company. And so they had rented me an apartment in Everett. So I was spending my weekdays in Everett in this apartment. And so Al made me a tying table and set me up so I could commercially tie in the evenings when I didn't have anything else to do. So I tied a batch of carry specials. That's time to deliver them. Well, I had ordered a kilo of pheasant.
Rump
Feathers, yeah, to put on there. And he wasn't comfortable with those not being buggy. So after my flies were tied, he decided he was going to put them in the microwave. And guess what happened to my order of flies?
They went poof.
They went pow. So we had to tie that order all over again.
Yep.
And
yeah, we tied through the night on that one.
Yeah.
And through a weekend so we could make the delivery date.
And the really fun part about that whole thing too is I had an opportunity at that time, since I was in temporary assignment in Everett, to go to the Salmon Guild in it's there in that Seattle area, the Salmon Guild. A lot of people famous salmon tires are there. So we're tying in the library, and everybody brings their stuff to tie. And here are all these salmon tires tying these fancy flies. And I'm sitting there tying my Carry Specials, a brand new tire, hadn't even been tying for a year. And I have to tell you, those guys were so cool. They kept coming over and saying, let me show you this little trick. And so they would show me a trick to make it easier. It was, I'm not sure I really realized at the time how cool that really was, but in retrospect, that was really a special night for me. Those guys were so gracious to this woman who could barely tie and Carry Specials. Yeah, that was cool. So what keeps you tying?
Keeps me tying.
Tying and fishing. What's your inspiration?
The
You,
passion.
it was a passion for a long time. Mike, it's just a job that I like. I mean, and I don't. Let's say you're a plumber, and you like putting new installations into showers. Then you do that, and as you gain a name at putting new installations in the showers, you probably get more of that kind of work and less of the other kinds of work that maybe it isn't so much fun for you. I enjoy tying hairwing flies. I enjoy tying them because I really like to see a stack of flies build up as I tie a fly, pitch it onto the stack, and I love to see stacks of flies build up. That's what turns me on.
Well, you like to create too.
I like to create, but that's a whole different thing. They were asking tying flies, so I don't have anything that really turns me on about tying flies. I probably now, as much as anything, on this Zoom stuff that we've been doing, I just absolutely love coming up with ways to do things different in Zoom, and that's more my training with a video theater from the 80s than it is to do with fly tying. But
And you like to teach.
yeah, I do
He
very
likes
much.
to teach.
I mean, that's what I respect about both of you is how you like to teach the old ways. Gretchen, what her dad taught, and Al, what you've learned over the years. And I really appreciate what you have done for our Healing Waters program. And you've been like there every week, just about. And I appreciate that. I wanted to interview you guys and just, have everybody get to know a little bit more about you guys and what makes you tick and what makes you do what you do. And I really appreciate everything you do for us and for fly fishing. So thanks for your presentation tonight. And we'll see you next week.
Al and Gretchen, from my perspective, you're fly fishing royalty, and I feel so honored to have you on our calls. And thank you.